If a group like Crass hadn't come along, there would not have been a punk movement. Punk would simply be remembered as another part of the rock and roll history. I'd worked for many years with sort of avant-garde, what people would say, not loud noise, but noise, just using natural sound, you know, whether the natural sound was hitting things or whatever, you know, just water falling, whatever, because that is the sort of natural rhythm of our life. 4/4 is a very, very manufactured. The rhythms of life are not da 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 da, you know, they're constantly changing. And so from the start, I mean, Steve never liked what he saw as my sort of avant-garde idiocy. He didn't like that. So we sort of, in a very humorous and loving way, were able to sort of balance. I mean, he wanted to have a rock and roll band, really. I mean, he'd have been happy, you know, rock and roll punk band. He didn't know anyone else who could play drums, so I suggested I do drumming for him because he was wanting to make a band. And so part of the deal was he had to put up with a lot of my I mean, I can't play rock and roll drums either. We were trying to create the atmosphere of what the song would be about. And the rhythms also were designed to sort of give the feel, you know, like using creating that sort of sense of, you know, fear and heartbeat and that sort of stuff, but not in a sort of but more. I mean, it's something that we never made an issue of. We didn't talk about it in interviews, and we just did it, you know. And I never ever used to try and explain what our musical or intention was. And I suppose, you know, an awful lot of it was completely unconscious. I mean, it was quite simply, you know, an expression of our own interest. Yeah, from the start to an extent, but I don't think they weren't political. They were more sort of our own personal feelings about how it was to be in that place at that time. So certainly our initial songs were much more to do with where we were at any given point and what we felt about it. You know, there wasn't any political aim or ambition. And I have to say that I think that is consistent, although we became regarded as being probably, well, the most political of bands that have ever existed, possibly. I've never considered myself political. I'm not interested in politics. What I am interested in is you know, how we cope, you know, with our day-to-day life. And so if part of our day-to-day life, as I observed it, was fear of, you know, of a nuclear war, then how do we as sort of beings exist with it? How do we rid ourselves of that fear? How can we walk with dignity? How can we enjoy life? That's what I was looking for. So I was using, in my songwriting, I used things like the bomb as sort of metaphors, really. That wasn't, I mean, I've never been in the least bit afraid of a nuclear war. And I figure if there is one, well, it happens anyway. So, you know, so what? I think on one of our albums there was a piece which said, be warned, the nature of your oppression is the aesthetic of our anger. To blow up a railway bridge, for example, for a political reason is one thing, but it becomes then defined. It's, in a way, the politic commodifies the act, if you understand what I mean. Whereas if it's for purely aesthetic reasons, then it is not commodified because it is quite simply, and as long as it isn't documented, you know, then quite simply it becomes an act for itself. And my own feeling about Stop the City is initially it was completely random, completely unplanned. It wasn't, and basically I'm not sure it even was trying to say anything. I mean, I think initially it was that, why not? Not why, I mean the why, I mean what's the why meant to be? I mean, it's not going to necessarily achieve anything. You know, so the why is bloody stupid. I mean, it's much better to say, why not? Let's go and, you know, blow up a motorway bridge. I prefer the aesthetic of the city of London, the big financial centre of London, when it's full of people having picnics, smashing bank windows. I mean, it's not going to do anything, is it, smashing a bank window, but it looks good. One struggle, one fight! I mean, I think initially it was that, why not? You know, why try to look for a reason? You don't need a reason if you have a conscience. Politics will collapse when we can laugh enough, and I don't mean that in a sort of, you know, commodity way, but really taking things seriously undermines the act. So I think why not is the obvious answer. You know, the centralisation of dissent, you know, which is what mass protest represents, you know, confirms and compounds the centralisation of power. If all of the people, of the millions of people who, for example, marched against the oncoming Iraq conflict, had made individual acts of dissent in their own neighbourhood, you know, perhaps that week or even better that day, then that would have an effect, because it would be profoundly disturbing to the status quo. As it is, you know, masses of people gathering in one place where they can be photographed, numbered, if need be completely contained, is a pointless acknowledgement of the power of the state. Well, I think it's a sort of anarchist protest in a sort of group sense is actually self-contradictory in my view.
So you believe in the individual?
Yeah.
What's your point then on the individual and on anarchy maybe?
Well, Christ first started putting up anarchy sign, not because we considered ourselves to be anarchists with a capital A, but because we got pissed off with people from the right wing or people from the left wing trying to recruit or to take, you know, like trying to contain us within their political agenda. So the anarchy symbol, and then mixing it with the peace symbol, which in those days was a very contradictory thing to do. And I think that self-contradiction of, you know, anarchist groupings is the downfall time and time again of sort of anarchist politics. You can't have anarchist politics. It's not a possibility. Because each anarchist is bringing their own agenda into a situation, and what you get is anarchist conflict. I suggested them earlier, you know, and that is sort of, in terms of activism, for those who enjoy activism or want to be engaged in activism, then, you know, individual aesthetic acts with no claim, with no political connection, even if there is a politic there, it should not be admitted. I mean, if for no reason at all that little cottage just suddenly blew up, no one claimed responsibility, they would be untrackable. No one, you know, no group, no political movement. But the political effect of that would be far more destabilising on the state than if I go down, blow up that thing, and then in the evening ring up the newspapers and say, well, you know, Al-Qaeda or the IRA or someone is responsible. The fact is, if we want to break, you know, the political system, we can't do it with something which mirrors the political system. And, you know, contradictorily, you know, increasingly, I don't care about what happens with my work. I'm simply working because I'm in a pursuit. I'm not interested really in publishing or putting stuff out. I mean, that seems to me to be rather irrelevant. What's important is simply, it's like a science, you know, like a sort of scientific inquiry, you know. Possibly there isn't, you know, I mean, results. What was it I once said, you know, if you think you've got the answer, you didn't hear the question. And I sort of think that about oneself. And I think it would be honest to say, I mean, I really spent all my creative life trying to destroy myself. Not in a sort of, you know, aggressive way, but just to get out of the way so that I can be creative. And, you know, I can't claim to have been very successful, but that's what I attempt to do.